Okay, let's start. Last class we discussed basics of functions. We said it's basically a usable code which we can like to use again and again. So we write in one place, invoke it. That makes it more readable. That also increases our efficiency and saves time in code writing. We'll get into more details. Too many packet loss, I believe. Yeah, now it should be fine.
Excuse me, sir.
So we'll review again. Go ahead, please. Tell me, ma'am.
Sir, many are asking, can they form a group of 4?
No. Maximum group of 3.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Yeah, guys, I'll probably give an assignment. Assignment would be a programming assignment. It's not going to be paper submission. So make a team. I'll try to give you biology next week, but submission would be internals. So help Sana for the team so that she can communicate. And if people don't give any information, then I'll randomly make the teams. And then don't crave that, no, we don't want to be part of the team. You can make a team of 3, you can make a team of 2. I wouldn't recommend the individual one, but those who want to, the individual one should talk to me separately and convince me why should they want individual one. Then I can look into that part as well. Let's resume back. So we revisit function definition. We will look at what happens when we invoke a function. So far we have seen that the number of arguments we pass and the parameters we define are same. What happens if there is a mismatch? How the return values are taken care of, and so on and so forth. So we'll look at a function definition. A function definition consists of 2 parts. One is called function header, which has 3 parts in it: function name, return type, and the parameter list, the parameters with which function has to use. Function body, which you define the local variables if there are any. The function statements, this could be any big program, whatever you want, and a return state. So just to give an example, I'm defining a function called interest, computing interest. This interest will, after computing, so tell me, so the interest, I'll pass 3 parameters. One is called principal amount, on which interest will be calculated. Second parameter is the rate of interest, and the years, how many years. And then this function should calculate the interest, total interest, for the given rate, for given number of years, for the specific principal amount. What is the interest one would get? So return me the interest value, and so we're saying return type is float. So this is called function head. Now in the function body, we would have defining the interest to be computed. And if I am doing simple interest computation, it will principal multiply by rate multiply by years into 100. That gives me simple interest. If I were to make it compound interest, does anyone recollect what the formula would be? If I want to compute compound interest and not the simple interest, the formula would be, let's say, interest is equal to principal into 1 plus rate by 100 power years. That is what would give you the compound interest. Looking at a simple formula, it will give me simple interest, and it returns me the simple interest, which is float type, and that's what I get. What is the function body? And then in the main, I can call this function. My principal amount is 1,000. My rate of interest is 6% per year, and my number of years is 3. And based on it should return executive value. And if we run it in simple interest, it should return me a float because I declare that is a float to print the value. This is the simple way of invoking a function, and then I can call this function for any interest amount. Given interest, given bank rate, I can pass my arguments, keep running it, and see which bank can give me better interest, and I can use that. That's how we basically define a function code. Confused between parameter versus argument. So when we define things, these are called parameters. And when we invoke the function, so can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Anna, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So your voice is lagging.
Yes, sir.
It's a bit laggy, but we can hear you, sir.
Yeah, there's a network issue in college, so I'm trying to cope up. Be is,
Yes, sir.
but not sure what I can do till the network improves. But try to look at. So what I said is, there's a confusion between happens, argument and parameters. So what we define at the definition, these are called parameters. What we pass them when we invoke the function, these are called arguments. And that is what about. Now, can we have function with no parameters? Yes, we can certainly have it. Is it mandatory to define the return type? No. If you don't define a return type will be taken as integer. If you look at the function, we have defined 3 parameters and we are invoking with 3 arguments. Is matching. Can I define my function with variable number of arguments? That is, if I give 2 arguments, it works with 2. If I give 3 arguments, it works with 3. For example, I want to find the sum of n numbers. So my arguments could be anyone 1 to n. You might have seen that in the printf. If you look at our printf syntax, we always specify the format specifier, and based on the format values, we can have any number of arguments. So that means printf definition supports variable number of arguments. And right now, I will not discuss those. We will discuss it sometime later when we go more deeper. Once we do the course, then we get back into more advanced level. Then we go to variable number of arguments, a variable number of parameters in a function. But right now, we'll probably put on hold and not discuss those parts. Other thing I would like to discuss and explain I was doing last class was scope of a variable. The scope of a variable is defined within the block that variable has been defined. So if you look at my first function here, which is subtract numbers, I pass 2 parameters b and a. The scope of this b and a is within this function only. Outside these functions, these parameters b and a does not exist, and they do not have any life. I define another variable called c, and the scope of c is within this function only. So I can define multiple places c, and their scope would be wherever those variables are defined. So now if we look at in my main, I defined a variable a, I defined a variable b. Now scope of these variables a and b is only within this function. So what I may be confusing you, so just give me a minute. Yeah, this should be better for you. So the scope of these variables a and b is within this main block, the main function block. This a has nothing to do with this a here. These two are completely independent. Now, when we invoke a function, so if you look at when I invoke a function, now when I pass a value like 1000, we basically create a value 1000 and assign that value 1000 to the variable principal. We assign that to that. Inside this function, I can modify these values. I can say rate is equal to 4. This does not mean something would change here.
Sir, your voice is lagging very much.
Yes, was it? Hold on, guys. Hello guys, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, college network is bad, so I'm trying to join using my own hotspot. So what I was saying is, to define the variables and the values. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Your voice is laggy, sir.
I'm seeing a echo. Somebody putting on microphone on. Regarding still issue, so I couldn't help it. Now hopefully it should be fine. I don't see any packet loss. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm saying is this variable I define a in this main has nothing to do with this variable a, because this a in this function subtract numbers is localized within this. This variable a is localized within a. So scope is always whichever block you are defined. If I were to define within some block, the existence of that variable would happen only within that block. And once the block is over, you'll probably see a different value altogether. Now consider this case, and what we would like to do is we would like to print, let's say, one. I think today my network is behaving very badly. So let's try to live with it and see what best we can do. The question is, we want to insert a code so that we get a right value, keeping these variables properly. Now I'm giving you 5 choices, A, B, C, D, E. Which of the 5 choices you think would come in this line, insert code here? Read it and tell me which of these 5 choices you think it will come here. Anyone?
Sir, B.
Subtract numbers A, comma B. Any other answers?
Sir, option D.
C, sir.
There are only 5 options. Okay, option B. Why do you think option B is the right answer? Who is speaking? Can you please explain so that I can explain you? You need to give a justification. Yeah, tell me, why do you think option B is the right answer? Yeah, guys, who should tell me, explain. That's how you're going to learn.
Because C is declared 0.
Where is C declared as 0?
In
In
int
the-
C is 0, sir.
See, C is declared in the subtract function here. If you look at C is declared only within this. Outside this function, C does not exist. Now what I'm talking about the scope. C is declared within this. Outside this, C does not exist. So if you're trying to use a variable C outside this, you would have problem. So
Sir,
if you want,
option
and
E is answer.
I'm coming to that now, 1 minute. Now, since I'm using C in this line, that means C has to be declared. Unless you declare a C, you cannot use that values. So that basically means that I need to declare C. Without declaring C cannot be used. So option B is certainly ruled out. Option C is certainly ruled out because I'm using C without declaring. And C language does not allow me to use a variable without declaring. So both option B and C are ruled out. Choice is A, D, and E. Which one would be the right option?
Sir, E, sir.
Option E.
Why?
E.
Because first of all, you're declaring variable C there, int C, and then A minus B, not B minus A. So option A will be ruled out.
So the question we need to understand is, and often there is a mistake, I'm invoking the values here. Whatever the values exist in this variable, those would be passed. So if I invoke this function with B comma A, it would become, since B is 10, so we'll be passing the values 10 and 20. And that means here, this would become 10 and 20. And since we are doing B minus A, this will give me 10 minus 20, which is minus 10. So essentially what you're saying is, whatever I'm declaring B or A here, it has nothing to do with this B and E. I could have jolly well simply said X and Y, and I could use C is equal to X minus Y. So whatever name you're trying to use in one function, the parameter name outside has no meaning. Now, since we want to answer 20 minus 10, and we want 20 minus 10, that means B should be 20 and A should be 10 when it gets invoked. So if I were to use, we already crossed B and C, if I were to use first option, B would be 10 and we want 20, so that's not right. Option D, I'm passing B minus A, which itself is minus 10. So here B would become minus 10. So that option also will be ruled out. That won't work. And so means the only option I'm left with is E, and E is the right option. Any questions about this?
No, sir.
You have to be very clear how these functions are basically used and passed. Other things you have to look at, I'll talk about linkages, little more detail. You can have a parameter mismatch. For example, I take the same code. If I were to pass 4 parameters, do you think code would work?
Sir, can you repeat it?
My function definition contains 3 parameters. But when I'm invoking, I'm passing 4 arguments. Will this work or will this fail?
Sir, it won't work.
What would happen? Will program abort or will my compilation fail?
Compilation fail.
You're partially right. Any other answer?
No, sir, it will execute, but we'll get the wrong values.
Why do you think wrong value would happen? What would happen to this value 4? So first let me answer. If this function interest is defined in the same file where main is, then compiler
Sir, we can't hear you.
was again bad connectivity. So if I'm passing 4 parameters and I'm defining only 3, sorry, I'm passing 4 arguments, but I defined only 3 parameters. If the function is defined within the same file, same C program file, then compiler would give you error. But if this function is defined in a different file, then there will be no compilation error. Then what would happen is all the extra arguments you pass would simply be ignored. If you're passing extra argument, it would not make a difference. However, if you were to pass less arguments, let's say I were to pass only, then there might be a problem. If I were to pass less arguments, so let me show you an example there. Let's look at my simple function here. So our main file, which is only this much. Can you see my screens?
Yes, sir.
Now the power function is defined in a one file powers, which is invoking a function square, which is defined in a file square. And square, I'm passing 2 parameters x and y and using these 2 values. In cube, I'm defined no parameters, I'm returning something. So if you look at square is defined with 2 parameters, cube is defined with no parameters, but when I'm invoking both with 1 parameter. So if you really want a square, it's actually doing a multiplication. So I should have given x comma x to get the square. But I'm passing 1. And since they're in different file, so it will take first value x, what it is passed, and second value it will take randomly. It does not really matter. So in the file, I'm passing only 1 argument. Square needs 2 parameters. I'm passing 1. So it will take a random value for the y and use that and do not see any error. Whereas for cube, I'm passing a parameter here, but cube I'm passing an argument, but cube is not defined with any parameter, you simply get 8. So if I run the code here, value, you'll always see, look at the power, it's a cube of something and a square of something. So cube will always get the value 8, and a square could be any random value because y could be random value there. So look at the code square, Since y is not being passed, it will take some random value, multiply with that. Cube does not use any parameter, simply returns 8. So when you print a value of x and square of x, x and cube of x, this will always give you cube of 8. This will always give you some random value. This is what you look at. So let's run the program. So first I'm saying x. Let's look at what the value of x would be in this case. When I'm running this, what would the value of x be? Any thoughts, guys?
Sir, y plus y.
Given the equation, what would the value of x, y, and z be? Can you guys read the screen? Is it too small?
No, sir, we can read it.
Okay.
X,
What is the
would be
value of
12.
z? Yeah, z would be 3, y would be 6, and x would be 12. Let's run the program. And you can see it says square of 12 is some minus number. God knows what that is. Cube is always 8. Square of 6 is some random number. Cube is 8. Square of 3 again some random number. Cube is 8. So if you are declaring the function outside, be careful, because if the different files, if you don't pass the required number of arguments, you might get into trouble and get a wrong answers. And that's the often mistake we basically do. Other thing you should notice in C is that if you declare any variable outside any function, like this, I'm doing int g is equal to 6. This declaration is outside any function. When you declare a variable outside any function, that becomes a global variable. That means this variable can be used anywhere in the program, and that would work. But if I'm defining a variable a, it can be used only within the main. If I'm using a variable result, it can be used only within this, nowhere else. Given this condition, can you tell me what would be the printed result here? Look at this code and tell me what would the result be printed. We are calling print number AB. We are calling this. Any answer, guys?
So which value of G should we take? 6 or 10?
You tell me now, you know the scoping. That precisely the question. So question is, should we take the value 6 or should we take the value 10? I believe that's the question you are asking.
Yes, sir.
Look what is happening.
So 6 is a global variable in assigned to
No,
G.
6 is not a global.
Sorry,
G is a
G
global
is
variable.
a global variable and 6 is assigned to it. But
Right.
in the main function, 10 is given to G as well.
Right. So this is what I'm trying to explain now. I start with declaring G as a global variable and G becomes 6. Because G is a global variable, it can be used anywhere in this program. So when I run my main code, A is given value 20, B becomes 30, and G becomes 10. So which was 6 earlier, G becomes 10 now. G is no more 6. And then I'm saying C is 50, D is 100, print number A, B. Value of A is 20, value of B is 30. That means when this print number is called, A would be value 20, C would be value 30. And G is a global variable, so G would have a value 10.
So basically, there's
Now
no
can you tell
point
me
of
what the answer would be?
60.
60. So answer would be 60.
So
If
there's no
however
point
I were
of
to,
giving.
yeah,
So there's no point of giving G as global variable there, because anyway it's going to get overwritten by 10.
in this code, yes, but
Yes,
sometimes it
sir.
may not. I may have another function somewhere. Let's say I would return a code here. If G is something, G is greater than something, set G is equal to something else. Then we don't know what G to be used. If code was if code was here, if G is greater than 100, G is equal to 100. Now what would happen? In this case, G is 6 is not greater than 100. So G would remain 6 only. So depending on our case, so it's a toy example. If this is the code, G would be 6 here.
Yes, sir.
However, in this program, I can also set here G is equal to 20. When I say G is equal to 20, then when I call this function, let's say I'm saying I declare here G is equal to 20. So first, G is assigned 6, then G becomes 10, then G becomes 20. So value printed would be 70. Are we clear there?
Yes, sir.
Let me take another case here. I would have declared at this point int G is equal to 30. And in the main, I say print percentage D G. Now in the function, I'm declaring a variable G, which happens to be global variable as well. But the moment I declare my local variable with the same name, it will override this global variable inside this function. If I declare a variable with the same name, it will override the global variable. It will not see. So your code would not see what the global value is. It will use the value of 30. Your answer would be 20 plus 30 is equal to 80. But when I come back, When I come back here, since this scope of G, which I declared here G in this function locally. So this G scope is within this function, print number only. So let me repeat again. The scope of int G is within this print number only, not outside. Whatever you do is remain local to G. It does not affect my global G. So even though G would be just 30 here, but the moment I come back to main, G would be this value, whatever it is, 10 to print 10. So understand the overriding part. Wherever you use it, you have to look at the scope, where it is defined, where it can be used, and that scope is important. Otherwise, you'll make a lot of mistakes. I think we are out of time now. Any questions about this scoping part of it? You need to do a lot of practice, figure out. But any question about the scoping, variable scoping?
Sir,
No,
are
sir.
all these there for internals?
The functions are not there for internals. Internals, you will have it till coding, looping, while loop, for loop, and those stuff. Conditional
Sir,
block.
could you give
Yeah.
some practice
Sir,
questions
what
to
type of query?
Okay, I'll try. See, if you look at the problem I solved in the class, like I gave you box question, box boundary. So some variation of that. I given you question of operators. I question of bitwise operators. I taught you about binary conversion. I taught you about the two's complement, negative numbers. So question will be based on that. I mean, I can't give you paper, but I'm giving you whatever I taught. Look at those questions. And paper will be based on that. Like print a box boundary similar to that. Can you do
Okay, sir.
and, bitwise or, something of that kind? Can you do conversion? Can you understand what is being done? Something of that kind.
Sure, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Sorry for network disturbance today. Couldn't help it. Thanks again.